Ask any American who came of age in the Clinton era how the Armageddon event affected them, and the answer is always the same. It wasn't just a news story, it was the defining moment of a generation. To understand the fear, you have to understand what we had to lose. The 1990s were a specific kind of utopia. We had starter jackets that puffed out like urban armor. We had Bauer FX rollerblades. We had Boys II Men providing the soundtrack to our first kisses, bleached hair on our heads, and Gatorade in our veins. Michael Jordan was a god walking among mortals. But Bruce Willis? Bruce stood alone. Rugged, intelligent, a single father. He was the cultural synthesis of Danny Tanner's heart and Chuck Norris's fist. He was the rugged individualist we didn't know we needed until the sky turned against us. When the news broke, the innocence of the 90s shattered. If that meteor had made its way to Earth, it wouldn't have just been a tragedy. It would have been the cultural equivalent of Tom Brady dropping dead during the Super Bowl, multiplied by infinity. Initially, we treated the global killer with skepticism. It felt like Y2K panic or a novelty news segment. But when NASA held that press conference, faces gray, voices trembling, nobody was laughing. The schools closed immediately. I remember the silence of the hallways when the announcement came over the PA system. The trajectory was confirmed. The realization hit us like a physical blow. If an alien rock could defeat America, was freedom even real? It was existential dread, wrapped in a terrifying question mark. Then came the solution, and frankly it baffled the scientific community. Although the oil drilling community was widely respected, the nation scratched its collective head when NASA announced that, rather than training astronauts to drill, they were training roughneck mudmen to be astronauts. It seemed insane, but as the days ticked down, those roughnecks became the avatars of human grit. Who knew that a crew of misfits, gamblers, and grease-stained laborers would become the shining symbol of hope for the free world? As the launch date approached, the atmosphere in America shifted from panic to a strange, unified hysteria. Our very democracy felt threatened by the cosmos. To keep the population from rioting, the government sanctioned the distraction to end all distractions, the World Hope Tour. I remember standing in a packed arena in my hometown, clutching my mother's hand. The Backstreet Boys took the stage, not just as heartthrobs, but as emotional grief counselors for the entire planet. There was something about 5 guys in matching white outfits doing synchronized choreography that calmed the national nervous system. From Topeka, Kansas to Twin Falls, Idaho, the tour moved like a fat kid to a self-serve ice cream dispenser. When the boy bands weren't enough, we looked to the screens. We needed a rallying cry. NASA eventually laid it out in plain English. Whichever crew reached their drilling depth first, liberty or independence would save the world. That was the line in the sand. The greatest oil drillers of all time versus a meteor hell-bent on total annihilation. The night of the intercept, there wasn't a car on the road. I was glued to the floor of my family room, sitting cross-legged inches from the TV screen. I remember crying, terrifyingly silent tears, while my mom rubbed my back and whispered, "It's going to be okay. Bruce has got this. Imagine everything you love. Your cat, Mr. Whiskers, your Game Boy, your family, your house. Now imagine a rock the size of Texas crushing it. That is the weight America carried that night. That was what was on the line. Bruce Willis was to Ben Affleck what Dr. Dre was to Eminem. The mentor, the father figure, the legend passing the torch. But we weren't ready for the torch to be passed. It was the biggest televised event since the Cuban Missile Crisis, but with higher production value. When the remote detonation failed, a hush fell over the planet. Then, a leader emerged from the airlock. Captain America without the shield. A man in a spacesuit with a mission. He shoved his future son-in-law back into the elevator. He took the burden upon himself. When the signal was lost, and the asteroid fractured into a million harmless shooting stars, the release of tension was enough to crack the Earth's crust. The world was ecstatic. Strangers hugged in the streets. Champagne flowed like water. But amidst the celebration, the realization set in. We had lost him. The grief was as loud as the celebration. Flags were set to half-mast indefinitely. My local high school didn't just hold an assembly. They petitioned the school board. Within a month, Lincoln High became Bruce Willis High. When school finally resumed, the tribute was visible in the cafeteria. Every kid had a Bruce Willis lunch pail. But the real tribute was the hair. It was a phenomenon. Teenage boys, who weeks earlier idolized the curtained hair of DiCaprio, began shaving their heads to mirror male pattern baldness. We called it the Bruce Buzz. It became the ultimate sign of respect. We walked the halls looking like little middle-aged drillers, with slight drinking problems, honoring the man who paid the ultimate price. He was a true patriot, a roughneck, a savior. We looked at the moon a little differently after that. We knew that somewhere up in the heavens, the spirit of a driller was watching over us, ensuring that we could keep listening to Aerosmith in a free world. When the dust settled and the ticker tape parades in New York City ended, the crew of the Independence and the Freedom had to do the hardest thing imaginable: go back to normal life on an Earth they had just saved. They were gods among men, but as history shows, being a god is a heavy burden. If Harry Stamper, Bruce Willis, was the Messiah, A.J. Frost was the disciple left behind to write the gospel. For years, A.J. struggled under the weight of the choice. Being the man Harry shoved back into the airlock came with a frantic, survivor's guilt. Sources say A.J. spent the late 90s trying to emulate Harry's leadership style, taking over Stamper Oil, but he softened. He famously patented a new high-efficiency drill bit inspired by the harsh terrain of the asteroid, which revolutionized deep-sea drilling. I'd like to say all worked out great for Frost, but when you've gained the highest of highs, there is only one direction, and that's down. I wish I could say he finally quit the dangerous stuff. He kept his promise and became the father Harry knew he could be, raising his and Grace's children on a quiet ranch, far away from NASA, strictly forbidding the use of animal crackers in the household due to emotional trauma. But AJ ultimately died how he lived. 1 month before retiring from the drilling game, he went out to sea one day and was never seen again. Perhaps the most tragic and bizarre figure of the post-asteroid world was the geologist known simply as Rockhound. After suffering a heavily documented case of space dementia, a medical condition NASA still refuses to officially declassify, while straddling a nuclear warhead, Rockhound returned to Earth a celebrity. He didn't handle it well. He used his hazard pay, which was tax-free thanks to a permanent presidential decree, to pay off his loan sharks, only to immediately borrow more money to fund a failed startup, Space Mambo, a line of asteroid dust-infused energy drinks. He was last seen in 2004 doing freelance consulting for Elon Musk, allegedly teaching early SpaceX engineers how to fix thrusters by whacking them with a wrench. Then there was Lev Andropov, the unexpected hero, the man who reminded us that American components and Russian components are all made in Taiwan. Lev became an unexpected darling of the American talk show circuit. He retired from the Russian space agency and opened Lev's Fix-It shop in Brighton Beach, Brooklyn. It became a tourist trap. People would drive from 3 states away just to have Lev hit their carburetor with a crowbar. Chick's story is the quietest, but perhaps the most redemptive. Before the mission, he was a man who had lost everything to gambling. After the mission, he didn't want fame. He didn't want the Time magazine covers. He just wanted to see his son. History records that Chick used his hero status to bypass family court entirely. He reconciled with his ex-wife not through money, but through the sheer undeniable fact that he had saved the planet. He spent the rest of his days living a simple life, coaching Little League. It is said that whenever a kid struck out, Chick would point to the sky and say, "I blew up a rock the size of Texas. You can hit a curveball." Grace never did get the chance to marry AJ, but she did found the Stamper Frost Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting the families of roughnecks killed on the job. She became the fierce protector of her father's image, ensuring that history remembered him not just as a driller, but as the man who loved her enough to die. Every year on the anniversary of the impact, she is seen at the memorial, looking up. She never did get over it. Neither did we.